Lately, you can't read a paper or see a half hour of news without hearing about a race issue. Granted, the Brown case in Ferguson, Missouri, and the Garner case in New York City are newsworthy. But to the extent that it exploits the issues or reverses progress in race relations, I'm not sure. Are we advancing race baiters? And that is entirely a different issue, but we should be talking about that too. What's actually involved there? What are the facts? Are they being falsified? A lot of us don't even know that, yet we're acting out in that regard. Are we advancing the human condition when we play out the narrative while the story is not quite there yet? What can our society do rather than patrol the streets, blocking traffic or looting, affecting other law-abiding citizens is another issue we want to talk about. Are there other ways to deal with race? Let's talk about it today on FIT TV. I have with me to talk about this on my left, Susan Settenbrino, attorney, and to her left, Dennis Speed from the LaRouche Organization. All right, gang. I've seen a lot of this, and I believe that there's reasons to protest. I was a protester when I was in college. I helped before Roe v. Wade. This is going way back, but I was one of those people holding up the sticks of the aborted fetuses. So there's purpose and reason for protest. So we didn't crash a lot of things back in those days, but now it seems to be different. I was really affected by the looting that went on in Missouri, and the situation, not knowing what happened in New York City with the Eric
Garner.
I'm sorry, thank you. The Eric Garner case is throwing me for a loop.
Well, I just think what no one's talking about, and I just have this to say, is that people, there's like 76% of voters and even 26% of state judges believe that the campaign contributions influence judicial decisions. People do not trust, they've lost confidence in our court system. 62% of the voters and nearly 90% of the African American voters feel that there are two systems of justice. This is important because this is what's at the heart of everything.
I got it.
People do not trust our court system
because
it's become politicized. There's no oversight and no accountability. So when they're out there, they're screaming, we need to change the system. Now, there may be racism that drives it, and there may be other agendas like protecting police officers or whatever's going on politically that's driving it. Because within this court system that nobody trusts, that's run politically in many cases, according to the people, and there's no oversight or accountability, they feel that any agenda could be advanced. So how could they trust it, especially when you have secret secret processes that we don't get to understand how we didn't get an indictment.
Yeah, that's the closed system she was talking about in the prior show that we did together that faces, well, we all have to face that. And I was wondering if, and I believe this two-tiered system about the blacks feeling that there's a secondary way to be dealt with, it has to be stopped somehow. Well, I don't know how to do it, but I'm just saying we have to address that.
That's my point. My point is we need to address the court system that we have. We can't allow a politicized court system without accountability and without oversight. And if we can address that and we can have accountability and oversight and transparency, then the people can be more assured and feel confident in the system that we have.
That
Do you
might
feel
work.
that that's what's going on
That might
as well?
work in terms of affecting the negative response that we saw.
Absolutely.
Well, as you know, Chris, in my work with Executive Intelligence Review and also working in the political field with Lyndon LaRouche for many years, we've seen this scenario happen before. I was involved right after the killing of Amadou Diallo. It was a famous case that happened up in the Bronx, 41 shots.
I remember that,
Bruce Springsteen and others sort of immortalized it. They're talking about it in song. But what happened was I was very concerned about the decision that would come out in the case, because I thought at that point there was going to be a real provocation. I think that really did occur. And I don't mean that the people who were protesting were wrong. It was, again, that the court process was highly, highly suspect. And so what keeps happening is that people who've been through this process recognize that things get rigged, and I'll have to just...
So then you agree with that assessment, that the process has to be transparent and reformed.
I'll just say quickly, just because it wouldn't be something that people would know, but back in 1989, 88 and 89, Mr. LaRouche...
Way back in 88 and 89.
Yeah, well, Mr. LaRouche went through a court case.
Before I was born.
Yeah. I went through court cases in which they were highly politicized. The outcomes were completely determined by political agendas. And when you're in a court case and you come out of it on the losing end, and you try to make it clear to people what happened, it's too late. Your life has changed forever if you're still alive. And in the cases of course, Brown and Garner, that's the issue.
Absolutely.
So what people are protesting about, actually, this doesn't mean all the protesters are right and so forth and so on. That's not what I'm saying. And I don't think that was what was just being said a few moments ago. I think what the issue involved here is the need to completely overhaul the transparency and provide transparency in the system as a whole.
Can I tell you, as an attorney who's practiced in Staten Island, I would not, personally from what I experienced, trust my life or anyone I cared about, their life, in that court system. And even in my book, The Unchecked Power Guide, it was addressed that Staten Island, and it's not the only place, but there's
we
a
say that
feeling
here.
of distrust because people feel it's very political, the system, and if you are not part of the just us, then you're in trouble. You're not going to get justice.
We thought here in our family issues, most of our issues are family issues, that maybe we could hear, and over the years, because I'm doing this like for 18 years now, that Suffolk County was supposedly the bad court, and nobody wanted to be heard in Suffolk County. Then it was Nassau County. Then it was Westchester County.
It's all
over the place.
Yes, because the system is politicized.
Absolutely.
And
I'm
there's
more
no
inclined to
oversight
believe
and no
what you're saying
accountability.
now than I would have maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, you don't have to go all the way back to tell me that there were political agendas. Those are some cases that you're talking about, but I'm sure you know of cases right now that you have concerns of.
Since in this particular case, my wife was on trial and she was convicted of one count of scheme to defraud and another kind of conspiracy. The trial was then basically thrown out, but she was nonetheless placed on parole for 15 years, even though she never actually went to jail for more than 1 day.
15
but
years
what does
of
that
parole,
do?
no jail.
Yes.
That's
See,
crazy.
so now what does that mean? You understand? In other words, she never actually served because it was found that there were so many irregularities in the court process. But it took so long to determine that happened.
Right.
Nobody can identify what really happened anymore.
What I was addressing, how they can use a court system to target with untrue investigations. It can go on for years, destroy your life, and have no basis in truth or fact.
I want to get to the point where I can understand what we can do with avoiding the type of protests I saw in Ferguson. And I completely get that if you were to be successful and with what you said, and what you both said actually, we would probably eliminate a lot of that. Getting justice right away. What do they say? Justice delayed is justice denied, or something.
That's right.
Okay. Right.
Well, let me just say about the Ferguson matter for a moment. Ferguson, Missouri used to be part of an industrial belt where people were actually employed in St. Louis. That's where it's right next to St. Louis. And this area was an intersection between, the Mississippi River, of course. That's what divides St. Louis from East St. Louis. And this was the south, west, and east coast were all connected in this hub of really vibrant industry. Now you have about 100,000 people in this area, predominantly black, of which I think 70% of the young youth under 26 are unemployed. You have a cauldron there, and whoever polices it is basically put in a position where something is going to happen, something's going to explode, because there's no condition in which the earlier industrial areas
could have rescued them.
Yeah, I mean, and in fact, people have been talking about redeveloping that area. Even the Chinese were talking about expanding the airport into a major industrial hub. I mean, there are things you need to do there. Now, I'm saying this because when you start trying to figure out what the police officer did that night, what Michael Brown did that night, and you can't even get an indictment, or you can't even, in other words, get into the court to test the validity. And the Garner case, I think, is even more outrageous with respect to that. Because the problem involved is if people don't even think that they are going to have access to a trial in which you can determine the truth or falsehood of what's going on. At that point, you can't control really precisely how they're going to respond.
What you're saying again, and I hear you're saying, and tell me if I'm wrong, it's the process. If people had trust in the court system, and if we dealt with that, what's going on in Ferguson and what's going on in Staten Island, because people aren't trusting the court system. They feel it's too political.
Right.
They feel there's no accountability or oversight. So how can they trust the process, especially when it's secret?
Sure.
And they have a right to feel that way.
Well, you can
They
see
have
it
a
being
right
an
to feel that
insider
way.
on the courtroom. I'm court watching all the time, and I know people who do court watch all the time. And when you're inside the court all the time, you get a good feel for where there's something missing.
But nobody's
You get a good
feeling
feel. Nothing's going on right down here, and I don't know what this is across the board. Doesn't have anything to do with race.
Yeah, I think that's the other
Everybody
topic
that we
that
know.
you wanted to take up.
Yeah.
I think we should just touch on that for a moment,
Yeah.
because this isn't white on black crime or
Right.
black on black crime. This is poor versus poor. I mean, nobody looks at
It's more socioeconomic.
Look at the economic status of the policemen that are in the areas that are working there. They're not exactly rich people.
Right, right.
And the people that are often involved in these crimes are not exactly rich people. And when you begin to look at the country's got a problem, and I'm saying, apart from when we get to the legal process, which is sort of like the end rung of this, where we had people working in manufacturing, also in agriculture at a certain point. They had dignity because they had skills. They were producing things.
Work was available.
And if you look at the country, everybody, you ride a road, you look at the bridges, the tunnels, the highways, the dams, there's so much work that could be done, but we know again, because of what we saw around the bailout of 2008, you see how much corruption you have with the banking system.
Sure.
You bail out people who were speculating with other people's money, but you don't put people to work. So there's already a sense in the country of a fundamental injustice. Now, when you put young people who are frankly very badly educated into the middle of this cauldron, they got no future. That's how they think. I have no future. So then once you have that attitude out there, and then you have the problems we have, now we have an explosion.
You think that's what's happening? Their big belief system is...
I'm saying that once you get the point of the explosion, Chris, and then we have no court system which we can trust,
to stop
that's the end.
Yeah.
I think that I think there's no excuse for looting or anything, but I do think that none of the media has addressed the court system and why they don't trust it. Yes, there's racism in the world.
Absolutely.
Yes, there may have been racism
That's
behind
what I'm
this,
trying to do here.
or there may have been political protection of certain offices. But because nobody's addressing the fundamental problems, which is the court system and the way our judges are chosen, and the injustice that's happening every day within our court system, according to the people, they've lost confidence. If we addressed it as a nation and said, let's look at the process. Who are our judges? What happens when they engage in
I
this
completely
conduct?
get that what you're saying
that
is
would
probably the
change
right thing
everything.
to do. That was my
yes.
next question. It's going to change
It's
everything?
going to change everything, because then we would be looking at
So
the
then
court
it
system.
wouldn't be as much of a race issue.
Well, the racism,
Can I get that?
because people would feel they would have trust within a transparent, functioning court system that has accountability, and they would believe that they would be more likely to believe that if there's racism or politics, it would come out because it would be transparent and accountable. But if you don't deal with the disease, these are all symptoms of the disease.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, in other words, there are so many of these cases, and they happen also in poor white areas as well. A lot of this stuff goes on.
Or rich, or anywhere. If it's political, it happens all across the board.
Yeah,
in the
however,
court system.
let me just say on this particular
focus on
point,
it.
right, that the issue for our society is, let's assume, for example, that there's a tremendous, really bad racial problem. Let's just say that that's the case. Well, then, if you have an injustice or a crime committed, whether that's a crime of looting or that's a crime of a police officer unjustly shooting somebody who was trying to actually, surrender, in either case, when that goes to the courts, if the people no longer believe that justice is available
Right,
from
that's
the
what
court
she's saying,
system
right, yeah.
before the
Right.
indictment or the process even
Right,
begins,
right.
now you have nowhere to go. And that's what I think we've got to address very, very quickly.
Sure, that's what I'm hoping. Well, if I could collectively say what the both of you had just said, I would say that that's a remedy.
Yes.
That's a very good remedy.
Let's just touch on Gardner for 1 second. Even in my book, I addressed an article where a staff attorney at the Brooklyn branch of the Legal Services for New York City, she characterized feeling in Staten Island as a carpetbagger in the South after the Civil War, that she felt like an outsider because she wasn't part of that just us political process. Those weren't her words, but the carpetbagger in the South after the Civil War was her words, because if she felt like that, if people feel like that in a place like Staten Island that they feel is political, and then you have a secret process, and everybody saw the video, and we all know that indictments aren't the most difficult.
Everybody still has a problem with OJ.
But that's a different process. That's a different story.
Well, I mean, justice-wise,
Right, but the problem here is if you have a court system that's run political and people already have distrust in your court system, and then you have a secret process, and you saw a video that really calls out for an indictment to most people, then
But you hear about some of the problems why the race issue was developed, like in Ferguson, if I can use that as an example, because they're of a lower economic status in that particular area, and that's more of a factor. Or the other thing that they say, I'm talking about what people like me say, what journalists say, the father out of the home with relative facts. However, I'm not sure how much of it plays into the state of what they are.
No, it's a feeling when you have gone through the court system and you felt injustice. That's probably one of the worst feelings anyone could have.
Right.
That can bring people to their knees. Right. That can make people act irrationally. Okay, that has led to people shooting people.
I get what you're saying.
In fact, let me give an example so it's clearer. I said a few things, but let me be extremely clear. Lyndon LaRouche co-founded a magazine, Executive Intelligence Review, very highly educated. He's talked to all kinds of presidents, this, that, and the other. All right, a process begins in a trial, and you see the politics of it. Right? This one was in Alexandria, Virginia. The foreman of the trial was a member of this special secret committee in government called Continuity in Government. It just came out. Dick Cheney just talked about it about 3 months ago. Nobody even knew this thing existed. This is a group of people that are supposed to run the country in the event of a nuclear war. The foreman of the jury his name was Buster Horton. I mean, the guy was put on the jury to make sure they got a conviction. Now, so we're there, we're of course protesting and yelling and screaming, right? But in other words, okay, I'm black, but LaRouche isn't. Most of the other defendants weren't. It wasn't a racial question. There was a fundamental level of injustice. And we were saying back then, this is going to really trickle down, and it's going to be everybody pretty soon. And I think we're at that point. And I think the point that's being made here very clearly to me is that by taking the politics out of the judiciary, that's where it's not supposed to be. Yeah, that's where it's going to start.
Exactly.
You guys really,
this is the answer.
I got what you guys are saying, and I think you're right. I just have this issue for me about I guess you can say the narrative, the word class that's carrying, the language that's moving forward that allows me to think, which I didn't think of before, that this is a time of race consequence.
Because people are making it that, but they're not dealing with the real issue.
I just don't know where to go with this. Yes, I want to find a remedy for this, right? What you guys have said to me is kind of logical for me, and I buy it completely. I buy what you guys are saying. I like it.
The remedy is dealing with it.
Yeah, and
it didn't really show. It wasn't here like last year. Okay, to give you an example, it wasn't on my back shelf last year. It was always here. That's not my point. I know what you're going to say. Back there, it wasn't there.
Because
now all of a sudden it's here and I can't get away from it.
Because the media is only addressing that. They're not addressing the underlying cause. If there's racism, it will be advanced in a political
some responsibility to the media.
The media must address the court system and the court system that we have to deal with and why people have lost confidence overwhelmingly in our court system. Once we have confidence, we can deal with racism and everything else.
Well, I would add something to that. See, I think that's your media in short term. And when I say short term, that doesn't mean unimportant. I mean, that's the way you've got to restore faith. There's a longer term thing. I was referring to the economic policy question because here's our big problem. In 2008, we gave, officially $800 billion to bail out the banks. But then when you put all of the other things, the credit defaults and all the other things that they actually bailed out, it's about $16 trillion as Bernie Sanders from Vermont, the senator. He got the actual Federal Reserve to give him the figure about all the transactions.
Because he was independent. Because he's a registered independent.
And I'm also saying, that's why he could do it. But I'm saying now that's a hell of a lot of money, okay? And with that, you could have actually rebuilt most of the country. You could have put millions of people back to work. You would have restored confidence, all right? Now, if you aren't doing that and you have continuous immiseration of the population and desperation, now you have a powder keg. It's set off. The issue is the issue of justice, as it was with the bailout, the issue. So overall, in the whole society, if people are feeling they get no justice anywhere, as they say, you're going to get an explosion.
Well,
look, I was a sheeple too.
Point to that.
Okay,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, because like you said, there's injustice all over, but the one safe place, as Sandra Day O'Connor said, has to be the court system. So when people are playing around all over the banking, the executive branch, like, you have to have a court system that is the one safe place that we can all go to.
Exactly,
we can get justice. When that fails, and that's the problem,
as a mediator,
then everything fails.
As a mediator, Justice Day O'Connor also said that she didn't think that the courts were the best place to solve problems initially. That initially we should have mediators and other people who were psychological professionals, mostly out of family courts, and then use the judicial system. It's a coin toss here, which way we're talking about it. But I'm just saying in a general way, I look at it that side. I look at that side. But I completely get what you guys are saying.
Yeah. The issue is a sense of, if there's a sense of equality before the law, then other matters of inequality, such as so-called racial matters, don't come into focus, because now people say, hey, yeah, this guy may not like me,
not there.
But if we go to court, this is going to come out.
I'm going to send this program to those whatever people I can, because I believe the message is being sent here in a way that I think hasn't been sent by me or anybody for that matter. In a way, thank you very much for it. I
just want to end on this. You cannot have a just society without a just court system. It is the most important institution that we have.
Oh, we still have a few minutes left. I'm sorry. I thought I got.
Well, that's okay.
You
got a good
a couple of minutes
anyway.
ago, and we summarized a little bit earlier, but that's good. I was referring, to the reason why I did this program as to the incredible amount of impact I'm getting about the race issue suddenly. I didn't have this experience before that.
Because
I'm not denying it doesn't. It existed, and I'm not playing on that. I'm playing on, okay, so here it is. It's in the back of my head. It's in everybody's eyes.
Well, let me say something a little bit different about that. May help. If you're living in a black neighborhood and you've seen a series of these sorts of things go on, then you can get a pervasive, sort of universalized sense that everything is against you. Okay. Now, there are a lot of people in this country that feel that way.
I know that from firsthand. I know what you're saying there.
Yeah. Okay, but now, so when the injustice in the two cases that have been in focus came, in my view, fully to the fore, the other matter, which was called racism, and may be racism in a lot of cases, suddenly got the headlines because people are really frustrated. Plus, when you had the looting in Ferguson, look, people were mad. Okay, that wasn't right. And of course, some people were protecting some of the stores down there, some of the black residents and so on.
Some of those store owners got their stores destroyed. And
yeah, but also there were many things that happened there. Some people did the right thing, some people did the wrong thing. But what the problem was, what precipitated it was the no indictment. And people had the sense, well, how is that possible? They couldn't even believe it. Then in the Garner case, that was like really tough to take.
So many people showed up. It's unbelievable.
Well, also, when you say why the race, and you keep hearing, because if people aren't being heard about the court system, they jump to the next thing. So there has to be, and the media feeds it. It has to be racism. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't racism. There could be racism. It could also be a political agenda to protect the cop. It could be anything. Why there was no indictment.
But we'll never know because there was no indictment.
We don't know because we have a hidden process within a politicized process without any accountability. And I have been to Staten Island, and I have personal experience as an attorney. And
I can tell you, I'm not going back.
I can tell you, it is very, very concerning, and that process must be open to the public. We need to know what happened in that indictment.
That's another summary, and it was a good one. Okay, we have about 30 seconds left. Do you want to add anything to any impactful thing you want to?
Yeah, I just would say this. Look, we've got a country which is the best in the world, but there's something that we have to fix. We have to fix the idea that people have access to changing their lives through economic advancement, and if, in fact, others are advancing and they're not, that if they have a recourse in the halls of justice to having
so it's not as big a familial issue as some of the people have been saying. Not as big an issue.
It's simply look that we had
economic conditions.
There was racism.
Fatherless.
He dealt with it.
We need judges of merit on the bench, not politicians in robes, and we need accountability and oversight and transparency immediately.
Thank you both very much. I appreciate this program. I think this is good. I think it's good stuff, and I'm glad we had a chance to talk about it on our show and get the education out there. You've been watching FIT TV, the program that brings you behind the scenes, and of all the programs that we've ever had, this one certainly did lay out some things that maybe you haven't heard before. I hope that this social order that we're presenting for you today gives people options, the way of thinking, and hopefully maybe you can solve the problems that apparently have been going on for years and never solvable. So I hope this information helped you. My name is Chris DiMaggio. Thank you for watching FIT TV, and we'll see you again next week.
Properly inflating my tires burns less fuel and saves me money on gas. Yeah, I'm saving Mother Nature from pollution, but more importantly, she saved me 11 bucks. Ow!
Environmental defense. Get green.
By keeping my car regularly tuned, I save money on gas and repairs. That also means cleaner air. You know, feels good to help save the cash, planet.
Environmental defense. Get green. For more tips, go to getgreen.com.
Introducing the all-new Enclave. It's a minivan to the max, with features like remote control sliding rear doors, 150 cable channels, a full sky view roof, temperature-controlled cup holders, and the 6-point navigation system. It's the minivan for families on the go.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promised.
Okay, hon.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promised.
What kind of man are you?
I'm a father.
Look here, my father was a father, and he smoked his brains out in the house.
Watch as he blows those smoke rings on my little red face.
You probably have asthma.
Asthma, schmasma. I'm telling you, nothing's gonna happen to your kids. I swear.
Don't swear when you're lying. You know very well that thousands of kids get bronchitis, ear infections, and even pneumonia from their parents' cigarette smoke. And didn't you promise your little angels you'd smoke outside?
Hey, Daddy.
Those little devils are just so sweet.
Do the right thing.
Please, smoke outside.
Until you can stop, go out for your kids.
Take the pledge. Call 1-800-513-1157.